Welcome to the Upbuild Enneagram Library. Drawing on years of teaching, coaching, and lived experience, we've created this podcast as a deep library of Enneagram knowledge to support you in the most important journey there is, the journey from the ego to the true self. Hi, everyone. This is Vipin, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Upbuild Enneagram Library. I'm here with my partners Prasada and Rasanath, and today we're going to explore another dimension of the Enneagram that gives us a deeper understanding of why we show up the way we do, especially in our closest relationships. This dimension is called Parental Orientation. It refers to the pattern each of us comes into the world with about how love, safety, and connection are earned. Each type has its own distinct parental orientation, and it continues to influence our behavior long into adulthood, often without our realizing it. By understanding our parental orientation, we can start to see the roots of our behavior with more clarity and compassion. And when we do that, we open up the possibility of relating to ourselves and to the people in our lives in a more conscious, less conditioned way. So to begin, Hari and Rasanath, what do we actually mean by parental orientation within the Enneagram framework?
The primary basis behind the parental orientation within the Enneagram has its roots in object relations theory. And the idea, the premise being that the first two objects that the child interacts with when the child first comes into this world are the father and the mother, and functionally, we call them the nurturing function and the protective function. Now, what we want to clarify here is that many times the father can be the provider of the nurturing function and the mother can be the provider of the protective function. So we are going to talk about it more as functions than as specific roles. And these two functions are absolutely critical for the formation of the child's identity, without which there is imbalance in the system. So these are also the two energies the child is looking for and is regularly interacting with, which is why understanding the parental orientation based on the Enneagram can become such an important insight into why we do what we do.
Thank you for that, Rasanath. Just to clarify, object relations theory is a completely separate area of research and study, and the parental orientation as it relates to the Enneagram is applying that framework to how it relates to the 9 types, and it does so in a very natural and seamless way.
That's right. So the objects essentially are the same from the object relations theory.
Mother, father, nurturing or protective, yeah.
And we call it parental orientation because the types are naturally oriented in a specific way towards those two functions.
Great, thank you. So, Hari Prasad, why is parental orientation such an important dimension to understand when looking at personality and development?
It demystifies a lot. When sometimes people say, I'm still a child in an adult's body, or I have to go find my inner child, or all of those different psychological understandings, there's a heavy truth there that we have not yet grown up. And those expressions exist as an acknowledgement of that for those who are willing to acknowledge. And the parental orientation is an extraordinary thing because it sheds light on that in such a specific and remarkable way that is almost inconceivable, because there is a pattern that exists in each one of us, and it's based on our type. And then you can extrapolate further with your wing what's going on there. But each one is predicated on the type that we've come into this world with. And it fits seamlessly into a bigger picture, a system where visually we would often in our workshops give a matrix that we learned from Don and Russ at the Enneagram Institute, where you can actually categorize each type in each of the different possibilities for their object relations or their parental orientation. And this will become clearer as we get into the nitty-gritty of it. But the point here is why it's so important is because there's something operating in us, unbeknownst to us, that is very regimented. It's very well inculcated into us, and it is defining our relations with our primary caretakers from the beginning of our lives, and it is carrying over with us into our adulthood because we have not grown up. We have not, we must acknowledge, we must admit, and this will help us to understand what it takes to grow up and to set these relationships in as constructive of a place as possible. It's really amazingly revealing.
Well, I often think that we are all children just walking around in adult bodies, so it makes sense what you're saying. And yes, I'm ready for you to demystify us. That feels very, very exciting. So let's start that process. Could you walk us through the parental orientations for each of the 9 types? And let's start with understanding the parental functions more, as Rasanath had laid out. Let's start by understanding those 2 parental functions, and then we'll go to the 3 different relationships with those functions.
So the 2 functions are, as I had mentioned earlier, the nurturing function and the protective function. The analogy here would be if you were to think about cultivating a garden, you require both the nurturing of the plant and the protection of the plant. And without one of the 2, there is an imbalance in how the plant is growing. Nurturing for a plant, we see, comes in the form of sunlight, water. That actually nurtures the growth. The protection comes in the form of support structures. Like some plants need a strong support structure that they can then use to grow. You need fencing to protect them from harm, especially if you have a vegetable bed and rabbits can come and eat away everything. So similarly, for a child, the nurturing and the protective functions are necessary for a very healthy growth. The nurturing function comprises of things like provision, so giving things that are necessary for the child to grow. The basic necessities for the child, when the child is crying, providing those basic necessities. Mirroring is a very important part of the nurturing function, to reflect back to the child what the child is doing so that the child develops a sense of identity through the eyes of somebody else. The protective function, elements like discipline, boundaries, do not do this, do this, providing the fencing around what the child can do or cannot do so that then the child can learn through that process. Those are elements of the protective function.
It sounds like the 2 primary functions that parenting provides. Are there any other functions, or does everything that happens in parent-child relationship fall under one of those 2 buckets?
That is exactly what the fundamental object relations theory actually does. It's the nurturing and the protective. Every form of energy are exhaustive. They are both a certain kind of force in the life of the child. The protective force is more, it has the more masculine quality to it. The nurturing has the more feminine quality to it. So if you were to think about energies broadly as masculine and feminine in terms of how they express themselves, the quality of them, it covers pretty much every kind of energy that we see. And then there's a spectrum. We can actually say, well, how much nurturing and how much protective is provided.
Okay. And I think maybe in the past, I might have oversimplified and associated nurturing with love and protective with discipline. But the reality is, it's all love. The nurturing is expressed in that love expressed in certain ways and manifested in certain ways. And protective is also love, then expressed in different ways. My own association is probably more indicative of my own parental orientation, actually, than anything else.
Well, also yesterday I was having a conversation with a client, and the person was talking about soft skills, and the person immediately said, "Well, I don't really like the use of the term soft skills." And, even in the corporate setting, there is the hard skills and the soft skills, right? There is, again, the associations with those terms is subtle and not so subtle judgment around them too.
Yeah, that's why to reframe it for people, people have started talking about the soft skills are now the hard skills. So now people can get comfortable. People can become more comfortable with the soft skills because they're now hard skills.
Because you see how there is an association where when we think about the corporate,
I don't want to be soft.
yeah, the admiration is towards the hard.
Yeah, I want to do hard things. So if you're telling me this is hard, I'm up for it.
Yes, and I'm willing to do it. Or, well, that's what makes me successful if I do the hard things, right? Which is why this is so important to understand is something with those object relations has been fundamentally tampered with in our childhood, where we have developed either inherently or because of our environment an association with one or two of those energies, with one or both of them.
You're saying we've overdeveloped.
Overdeveloped or underdeveloped.
Yeah, overdeveloped or under with some kind of dependence or reliance on either one or both of those energies.
Or perhaps have formed an unconscious bias.
An unconscious bias, yes. I know I have one.
I must say, we're at this point in the podcast where if you're going to then try to diagnose your parental orientation based on what we've just said, stop right now, please. It will not be so fruitful to do that. You may see, oh, wait a minute, I don't like too much protective stuff going on, or, oh, the nurturing feels too soft to me, therefore I must be like this. Or you might even try to type yourself based on that if you don't know your type, or you might question your type. No, that's not how this works. What we want to get straight here is that there is a separate reveal going on. When you understand your particular parental orientation, there is a separate reveal. So it's not just that, well, if I like soft and I don't like hard, then I know I must be this type. It doesn't work like that. You'll see how it works.
Yeah.
So let's just be very clear. Blank slate coming in.
Thank you. So that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you, Hari Prasad, next, which is let's go into the three different types of relationships we can have with these functions, these energies that Rasanath just laid out. So we have the nurturing energy and the protective energy or function. And what are the different relationships that each person can have with those functions?
First of all, there are three categories based on those two objects. The third category that is to be stated now is both. You can have a relationship with both. Now, obviously, we all do have a relationship with both, but here we're talking about a fixation. We're talking about a particular focus that is even indicative of fixation. So it's either directed towards protective, the nurturing, or both. And then there are three different relations with those objects. There is attachment. That means I want.
I'm familiar with that one.
It's never enough. I just always want more. There is rejection, flip side of the coin. I don't want. Anything I get is too much. And then there's a very interesting one that sits in the middle. And it's not the most balanced. It's not just like, oh yeah, this is the right one. No, they're all equal. They're all equally fortunate and unfortunate, depending on our consciousness. That is frustration. Now, frustration is not what you would immediately think. Frustration is actually more similar to attachment than it is to rejection.
Yeah, that's not what I would have expected.
Exactly. But it's attachment with a twist.
Attachment with a twist of rejection.
Almost, something like that. The way it plays out is I want this so badly. I'm so attached to it that not only is it never enough, but it's never coming in the way that I want it. And therefore, I develop an edge around it. I get a chip on my shoulder about it, where it's like, ugh, I don't like this. This is annoying me. It's bothering me. It's frustrating me. Why? So the attachment types, in contrast, are, oh, I want more, I want more, I want more, intoxicated. It's all positive in a way. I just want more, I want more, I want more. Of course, that's not actually positive in terms of value. It's just the feeling there.
Because I can't get enough. And it doesn't matter in what form it comes, I'll take it.
I'll
Now, when
take
you're
it.
talking about the frustration, it sounds like I want it so badly, but you're just not doing it right.
Yes.
And it has to come in a very specific form and shape. And my frustration is with that not being met.
Yes. So it develops a kind of negative valence emotion. Attachment has more of a positive valence emotion. That doesn't mean it's more valuable or better, but we're talking about the valence of the emotion. So it's a little more positive valence versus negative valence.
Can you just explain valence for those who are unfamiliar with that term?
Yeah, it's like I'm happy. That's a positive valence emotion. I'm angry is a negative valence emotion. It's intuitive. Now, why we're distinguishing is because it doesn't mean that if you're happy, you're better than if you're angry.
It seems like it.
Well, I may be happy because I just committed a murder, right? Or I may be angry that somebody was just murdered. So you see, in the extreme case, this is not what it seems, right?
That just became very dark. All of a
Yes,
sudden.
yeah, it's important to understand through the extreme case, like why this is as it is. So a positive valence emotion is not the thing to strive for, and a negative valence emotion is not the thing to shut down. And that's unfortunately where we get all of our fixation and our suppression from, is striving for positive valence emotions and trying to shut out negative valence emotions. That makes us very unhealthy. What we need is to be able to integrate both and direct them, channel them in the right way. So ultimately, one becomes positive valence, but not with a relationship of sneering at, shutting out the negative, able to healthily integrate and channel them in a positive direction. Higher consciousness. So much can be said about this. It's a big subject. We talk about it in many other aspects of our work. But the bottom line is frustration here is not worse than attachment. So if we're tempted in that direction, it shows our bias. And that we have to remove if we want to understand this dimension of the framework. We must remove that bias. So attachment, rejection, and frustration are the three possibilities for how we relate. What are the relations with the objects of protective, nurturing, and both? And they each are equally fortunate or unfortunate depending on our consciousness.
Thank you. So would you say frustration could be considered even more attached than attachment?
Kind of. So the other aspect of this is it means I feel like I have to do it myself. I am so done with the people who are supposed to be doing this for me that I feel like I just have to do it for myself, because if they're not doing it right, so who will? I have to do it for myself. So I basically become, depending on where the fixation is, on which object, I become the self-caretaker. So I'm going to do this for myself. And I'm kind of like, again, there's a chip on my shoulder about it. It's like, why should I have to be doing this? I didn't get what I needed, but I'm doing it anyway.
So let's now integrate this understanding of the parental orientation with the Enneagram types. And I think when we're in our workshops, it's so helpful to be able to visualize this, as Prasada, you were alluding to earlier. You can think about the parental functions on one axis. You could say the x-axis, there's the nurturing function, the protective function, or both. Those are three columns. And then across rows, you can think of these three relations with those parental functions of attachment, frustration, and rejection. And so when you cross those parental functions with these three different relations, you get 9 boxes. Conveniently, you have 9 boxes and there are 9 Enneagram types. So can you help us understand how these two frameworks integrate?
I mean, it's so crazy that it works out mathematically that way. And when you see the precision of this, it's mind-blowing. And lots of credit to Don and Russ, who've taught us so much about this dimension and who created that matrix and really mapped things out. It's unbelievable. And you see a divine hand in this. Like, how could it be a coincidence? How could it be a coincidence? It's unbelievable. It's just like when you start to see patterns in the world, and Don and Russ did a beautiful job of pointing this out in so many different ways, not only with respect to the Enneagram, but just seeing how nature's laws function in all these different patterns that cannot be accidental, cannot be coincidental. The odds of that happening are impossible. So you see here, there's a little glimpse into the wonder of existence and what is so much bigger than us, just from seeing how you said conveniently these 9 boxes show up. It's really amazing. Let us be in that state of wonder. I also think it's very helpful to recognize, just as we're about to start going into each type's specific parental orientation, that there are overarching pieces to this. So the relation of attachment, frustration, and rejection, it means something. It means, and I've alluded to this, I said, you may be a frustration type. And this is how Don and Russ would speak about the types that are frustration types. You become defined by that. You become a frustration type. What does that mean? Frustration is always just beneath the surface. So like we talk about predominant emotions and how that predominant emotion is always just beneath the surface, similarly, the parental orientation and the relation to the object is just beneath the surface. So it adds a whole new spectrum of considerations and things to be conscious of, conscientious of. You'll see the frustration types walk around with a palpable frustration. You'll see the rejection types, they walk around fearing rejection, and so they strike first. I'm going to reject you before you reject me, or I'm going to figure out a way to make sure that I'm not rejected. And the attachment types, they walk around like, oh, more, I'm attached. You can see it in their being if you really understand this deeply.
So let's do the intersection. Rasanath, please, can you walk us through how the types fit into this matrix?
So we'll begin with the attachment row, reminding that in the attachment row, we can have attachment to the nurturing, attachment to the protective, and attachment to both. So we are talking about 3 types, one which is attached to nurturing, one which is attached to the protective, and one which is attached to both. So the attachment to the nurturing is the type 3. And specifically, what the 3 is attached to in the nurturing function is mirroring, reflecting back to me. Reflect back to me who I am. Tell me my purpose and value. That's the attachment to the nurturing function. The attachment to the protective function is the type 6. The protective function in the form of discipline and orientation in the world. This is where you need to go. Go here, do this. That's what I'm actually looking for. How am I oriented in the world? And I'm very attached to that, which is provided by the protective function. And attachment to both, you can take a guess now when you see the pattern. We have the 3, the 6. So attachment to both is the type 9. So I need both. I need the mirroring. I need the mirroring, the comfort, and I also need the orientation around the world. And I want both of them at the same time, which is also one of the reasons why you might actually look at the 9 as 9 always talks about balance and harmony. I want both. I want both. You know? That's what I'm looking for. So the attachment types, 3, 6, and 9.
So frustration types start with the 1, frustration with protective function. So I recognize that there is a strong need for discipline and to actually really be feeling like I can be good. I need to know what is bad, what is wrong, and to not do that and to be guided, strongly guided. But nobody really has the standard that I have, so I better do it myself. Frustration with the protective. Then next one we'll do is the 7. 7 is frustration with the nurturing. I want experiences that make me feel happy and cared for. I'm being provided for. Give, 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 give. I don't want to be deprived. Oh, but nobody's giving as much in the way that I need or want. So I'm frustrated. I better do it for myself. I'm going to go out there and make my own experiences of life that will nurture me all the way through. And then you have the type 4, frustration with both. I get that I need so badly protection and so badly nurturing. Who can argue? It's obvious. We need those forces for our well-being, and I'm not getting either one in the way that I need. This is so outrageous. I have to do both for myself. Who in the world has to do that? Nobody else. It's only me. I'm so alone and so unfortunate that I got to do everything for myself. Everybody's ahead of me. And my God, how will I ever do it? It is too overwhelming.
Thank you. And then Rasanath, can you walk us through the rejection types?
So rejection, again, we have nurturing, protective, both. So the rejection of the nurturing function is what I will start with first. And we can all take a guess. The rejection of that nurturing function appears as completely opposite of the nurturing energy. Remember what the nurturing does. I overdo the other of what I reject. So type 8 is the rejection of the nurturing. It makes sense. The soft, touchy-feely stuff. We had an 8 in our workshop who told us when his mother gave him hugs and kisses as a child, he said, "Stop that. Stop that." I don't get it. It just makes me uncomfortable. And so what I tend to do, I don't get that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do more of the other, which is also why type 8s, we've talked about this, it feels very masculine. It's the alpha male energy, the overdoing of the protective.
They're rejecting the nurturing, which is why they're providing the protective.
The protective, right? And they overdo it, and that's what they provide, right? So now we come to rejection of the protective function. The type 2 is the rejection of the protective. Now, since I reject the protective, again, the protective discipline, move this way, move that way, giving the direction, that energy is like, this is just too, I don't like this. I can't speak this. And so what I have to do is overdo the other. I'm going to be the loving one, the caring one, the one that is really soft. And that's when we get the type 2. So that's the 8 and the 2, and there is only one more type remaining. Now, the rejection of both is the type 5. Now, you also understand the complexity of the type 5. So if you were to think about the predominant energies in this world as nurturing and protective, and if I'm unable to relate to either one of them, what do I do? One of the things that Russ Hudson tells us as an Enneagram 5 himself is he says that the 5s feel like they have been born on the wrong planet. I'm an alien in this space for multiple reasons, but this is one of the primary reasons why I don't understand the gamut of human emotions, really. neither the nurturing nor the protective, which is one of the reasons also why the fives like objectivity. It's separate from both,
Separate from human emotions.
separate from human emotions, right? Nurturing and protective. So then what's my place in the world? Well, if I'm separate from both, what can I do? I can objectively observe knowledge. That's what I give. So I have to do something. I'm a provider of something as a rejection type. That's what I provide. I provide neither in the sense of the emotions, but then what is not touched by emotions is observation, is knowledge. That's what I'm going to give.
Wonderful. So to make this even more concrete for folks, let's take one or two examples to really illustrate how someone's parental orientation shows up in their adult life, in relationships, in work, in stressful situations.
I just want to give one really simple, quick one. So you can imagine who owns the workplace. It's quintessentially the three, right? The achiever. They're rising to the top of the ranks and calling the shots and promoting other threes who want to be like them and get to the top. And it's all just predominated by threes. There are other types that get to the top, of course, but the threes, they're sniffing out the way to the top and more determined to get there for their sense of self-worth than any other type. That is just how it is. And our world rewards that in a way that is guided by threes and for threes to profit off of. And it also creates crazy anxiety for the threes and neurosis around this for the threes and competition and I'm not enough and all of that, imposter syndrome. So what's happening here is actually the top means nurturing. People will see me. I'll be mirrored. People will clap for me. I'll get to give a presentation. I'll get to receive an award. I'll get a paycheck that says, you're valuable. Yes, congratulations. I'll get all of these things. And I will be able to pat myself on the back and feel like, see, the world just appreciates me because I'm a contributor. So all of this is attachment to the nurturing. It comes in terms of my bank balance. It comes in terms of my title. It comes in terms of my influence. It comes in all different ways, but it's all actually the attachment to the nurturing. And when somebody is not performing, they're not making me look good and they're making me waste time and energy that I don't have because I need to be getting to the top or getting higher and better and doing more and contributing and contributing and contributing. So now you're really frustrating me. That doesn't mean you're a frustration type. That's actually your attachment to the nurturing that's playing out in the form of frustration because you're not getting me the attachment that I'm looking for.
Also, what is important to understand is that these three emotions are circular in the sense that, when you're attached to something and when it's not coming enough, then you become frustrated. When you're frustrated long enough with something, then you basically reject it and go to something else, right? That is just the cycle of how we operate because of attachment. This is a very fundamental and very important piece. What we have to understand is in this cycle, right at the beginning of our life, we are already at a certain point in this cycle, which is actually pretty mind-blowing if you really think about it. So that's just our starting point in this life. Just so that we understand that this is all the three are just regular human emotions that spring from attachment.
And again, this contextualizes further what's going on within one's parental orientation. So I'm getting frustrated because I'm attached. That doesn't mean I change my parental orientation. It doesn't mean suddenly I'm a frustration type just because people can perceive my frustration. It's still, we have to see what is for the sake of. It's for the sake of attachment to the nurturing. We always have to point it back to what is the causality. So the causality is the frustration is stemming from attachment to the nurturing if I'm a three. And likewise, if I'm an 8 and my rejection of the nurturing leads me to take on an overprotective way of being, then even if I feel soft and I feel like, why are people not giving me nurture? Which 8s will feel, though they don't like to feel that way, but they will feel that. It doesn't mean that, now I'm changing my parental orientation because I'm seeing that I have this need for nurturing. No, it's just that I'm having to reconcile with my rejection of the nurturing.
It's still that I will be able to speak that language the best. But when I get healthier, I recognize the importance of the other language. I also feel like I need it. That is the growth.
And therefore, I can also give it to other people. Because when you become healthy, you want to give what is valuable.
Hari Prasad, you were talking about the example of the 3 and the 3's attachment to nurturing. I think one of the descriptions that Rasanath, I remember you sharing, I believe came from Don and Russ, about the 3's parental orientation that was so helpful for me was to imagine the type 3 as a baby who takes his first steps, and all of a sudden the parent, or the mother in this case representing the nurturing function, starts to clap and cheer for the baby, and the baby doesn't fully understand the moment, but sees I'm being seen by the parent, by the mother, and there's a twinkle in that mother's eye. And I'm thinking, I like this feeling. Let me do this again. And that twinkle in the eye of the mother on my first steps, I'm actually seeking in every interaction, in every relationship. And so, Hari Prasad, you were talking about, look, that's represented by my climbing the corporate ladder. It's represented by my bank balance. But to see that, wow, I'm looking for this twinkle, this feeling of being seen and recognized and being validated and clapped for in the eyes of every person that I'm talking with, was a profound awakening. You see, wow, it's so, there's so much desperation, there's so much attachment to that mirroring that I, even in the most subtle or mundane interactions, that's present. That was a very powerful unlock.
I had a conversation with a type 3 earlier this week who was talking about how she just doesn't want validation anymore. And you see the same cycle that actually repeats. I'm so attached and it's not coming as fast and the way I want. And I feel so terrible. I'm just going to reject it, right?
Or I just want to be above it because it makes me feel like I'm controlled. So I want to fancy that I'm above it, and I convince myself that I am. I don't need it. I'm just that good, right? But meanwhile, I'm trying to live my life in such a way that the crowd always goes wild.
The humility that you develop is, one, recognition of the attachment, but also knowing what healthy attachment actually looks like.
What does it look like?
You know deep down that attachment is actually a function. And that's why in the object relations theory, one of the biggest things is attachment theory and what secure attachment is. Secure attachment is a very healthy provision of the functions. When there is a very healthy provision of the functions, it forms the core of my identity in such a way where even when I look for it in the world, the desperation doesn't exist. There is also a depth to what I receive. And when I receive it deeply, even when I'm attached to it, and I would love more of the same, here's the interesting thing. I also begin to see how the world doesn't really provide what I received. It can't really give me the depth of what I received. And so I don't look for it the same way because I know what I received is so deep that the taste of it can only be provided by a handful. So the way I approach the pursuit of it significantly changes. It's not that I stop pursuing it. The way I pursue it changes drastically.
Very good. Thank you. We often will speak about the type 3 because we have that energy is so pervasive in the world that we are living in, whether one is a type 3 or not. love to hear about just let's take one other example of a type's parental orientation and how that shows up in their adult life, in relationships, work, or moments of stress.
We can talk about the type 6 because it gives a relationship, an attachment relationship with the protective function. The feeling of the hard ground underneath my feet, that somebody has my back, right? And I remember Russ Hudson giving the example of how the child is tossed up in the air and held back again. Somebody is there to catch me. Somebody is there to catch me. Even if I'm thrown up in the air, what you see in the child is when the child is thrown up, there is this, you know, and then being caught, there's a sense of relief. That's the experience for the 6. It's almost like, will someone have my back? Because life just throws me up in the air. Will someone have my back? And that is the protective role. Somebody has my back. Somebody has the ground ready for me, to hold me, to catch me when that happens. And I'm looking for that. The other thing that the protective function also provides is a sense of direction in the world. This is how we walk. This is how we move. Go here, go here, go here. And that also has a feeling that somebody is looking out for me. Somebody has my back.
Because there are a billion things that I can do in the world. How am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to do? This is how the 6 feels. It's like, I could do anything not anything, but there are any number of possibilities, unlimited possibilities. How on earth am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to do at any given moment? Much less like the ultimate, what is the purpose of my life, which I really am craving to know. What is my purpose? How am I supposed to live? And I need somebody to direct me.
That is what I'm like, when I grow up, when I go out into the world, that's what I'm looking for. Somebody has my back. What that does to someone is the experience of trust. I can trust where I'm moving. I can trust where I'm going because somebody is telling me this is where I need to go. And so that is what I am looking for, just like the 3 looks for the validation, the mirroring. The 6 looks for the orientation and the support when they go out into the world. But it's something that I have been always looking for, even as a child. Right? And when that doesn't come, then I experience the loss of it, just like the 3 does with the mirroring. But when it's done well in life, in the beginning stages of life, and that's provided well, there is a way in which I internalize that. This is a very, very important piece. I internalize that function. And the internalization of that function means a sense that I can still look at myself. I can still orient myself through what was given for me very early on in childhood. The sense of identity, again, going back to secure attachment, the sense of identity is so well formed that I can actually live off of it. It's not that I don't experience the absence of it, but it doesn't make me desperate or throw me off. There is a way in which I can still harness what was provided because it formed the solid core of my identity very well.
It also doesn't stop me from needing it in the present. It's not that, oh, okay, it was given to me in my childhood. Now I've got it. That's not how this works.
But it significantly affects the way I pursue it.
Yes, that's why the object relations are always playing out, even in our adult life. But we may pursue it in a more secure, healthier way if we received a certain amount in a healthy way in our childhood. So that pursuit never stops, but it has to be grounded in understanding the importance of what we're pursuing and what will be most effective in achieving it, not selfishly, but for my own well-being and wanting to really provide that for other people. And the 6s, unfortunately, what ends up happening is because there aren't so many good protectors in this world, and we all have a sense of that, and you can see, my goodness, the experience of women, it really boggles my mind again and again and again. Every woman has had some experience of a protective figure, typically a man, abusing them, exploiting them, or wanting to, or making them feel unsafe. It's practically happening all the time. So how many trustworthy protective figures are there? Now, for the 6, this doesn't have to be a man, of course. This is the function. But you can see that whereas it most closely aligns to the masculine nature, it is so difficult to find. And so then the 6 is disappointed and disoriented and hopeless, not able to trust. And even when it comes along, if by chance it ever does, even if somebody is healthy or relatively healthy, the 6 will not trust. And they will project things onto that person and look for perfection over humanity. And they will set the person up. So I'm looking for an authority, looking for an authority, looking for an authority. And then I tear down the authority, tear down the authority, tear down the authority, or I just go my separate way. Or I just don't believe that there is an authority and I have to make myself the authority. And that becomes really, really unhealthy. It can be very destructive.
One thing you said raised the question for me. We've been talking about how nurturing is often represented by is a feminine energy and the protective is a masculine energy, but it doesn't have to be a male and a female providing those. If you had a mother who was an 8, are you more likely to get the protective function from an 8 mother or the nurturing function from a 2 father, a type 2 father, or is that not how it works?
It depends. It depends on how healthy the person is. And it depends on how healthy their partner is. Because there's also a lot of compensation that happens between partners, consciously, unconsciously. Most of it is unconscious. So if you have, for example, an 8 mother and an 8 father, now what happens, right? How are you going to get nurturing? So hopefully somebody gets it. And certainly for a mother, that's really, really important. It's important for both, but it's especially critical for a mother to understand that the need of nurturing. And it is not beyond them just because they're an 8. They still have the feminine energy. It is a natural inborn instinct in them to nurture. And it is very wonderful and needed. And men need to learn this. It is not as innate, but it's critical. And you can imagine any number of permutations of the situation based on the health of the person, the type of the partner, the health of the partner, the health of their relationship, and so on, where it can pan out in different ways. So it's not necessarily that if you have an 8 mother, that's going to be the protective function. It may be, or it may be sort of gray zone where this can either be good or bad, that I'm getting some of the nurturing, some of the protection, and it's not so cleanly defined. That can be good if it's like, well, I'm getting a lot of both. And if I'm getting overdone, overcompensated, or not enough, then it's not so good.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was helpful just thinking about there's the gender piece of this, and then you layer type on top of that. So some combination of gender, type, health, and our partner's gender, health, and type all play into then how one is providing the nurturing and or protective functions.
Yeah, exactly. And every single person, regardless of their type or their parental orientation, needs to learn to both nurture and protect. That is uncompromisingly the case. One must learn how to nurture and how to protect. It's not that you get a buy if you're this type. Oh, look, my parental orientation's this way, so I don't have to do this. I'll just neglect that. No, that's not the point. What we're looking at here is the psychology of our fixation, not a get out of jail free card for what is needed in the world and what is required to be healthy. To be healthy, you need both nurturing and protection. If you want to help other people be healthy, you need to give them nurturing and protection. You may recognize somebody may be better than you at one of these or the other. Try to change, try to become better yourself. You may not be meant to be the best nurturer or the best protector, but you have to try your best and make sure that other people can do what you can't do if you really care.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and I think it would be wonderful to move to our final question, which is how does recognizing our parental orientation help us loosen the ego's grip on us and move us more toward the self, which ultimately is our purpose in understanding the Enneagram and with all of the work that we do at Upbuild?
The first recognition when you understand the parental orientation is the importance of both energies in our life. It's not just psychological, it also has a spiritual implication. Very big spiritual implication. In fact, the psychological is a result of the spiritual implication.
Yes.
And the understanding that a human being is comprised of both the nurturing and the protective. And when we talk about the divine and the orientation towards the divine is nurturing and protective. And that's where the need for or the attachment to those two energies are coming from, because naturally that's how we are oriented. So that's the first piece. The recognition of that is a huge one, because now, in terms of how we pursue it, we also recognize how we need to pursue it and why does the need exist in us in the first place. The second piece is, if you are in the role of a parent, it is understanding the orientation of your child whose Enneagram type you might know is significant. Why they respond to you the way they do is huge when you understand their orientation. And then it actually sets a very different field. You look at them very differently. And that has the capacity to change everything in terms of your relationship with the child. The third piece here is our own healing. So much of the wounds that we carry originate with our parental figures. That's why it's called object relations theory, because those are the first two objects that we actually learn how to see the world through. Right? And so when there are wounds, knowingly and unknowingly, in those relationships, those are the wounds that we are essentially carrying and playing out in our lives.
So just tying that back specifically to the journey from the ego to the self, you cannot get to the self if you're carrying all kinds of wounds that are preoccupying you and derailing you. It goes without saying, and yet it must be said. The thing is, we are, even on a spiritual path, we have so many doubts, we have so many misconceptions, we have so many concerns, anxieties, and ways of mistreating other people and ourselves based on our psychological incompleteness, our lack of wholeness, our wounds and traumas and troubles. We have to stop shoving that under the rug. And we have to actually take responsibility and work through these things. As Rasanath said, we have to heal. Now, that can become a very all-consuming thing in and of itself. And I've seen many people either dilute or walk away from the spiritual path altogether in the name of, well, I have to first fix my psychological stuff. That is not what we're advocating. That is worse. Unfortunately, that is worse, because then you abandon your real self in the name of psychology. What we have to do is integrate both, and one is more important than the other. Your soul, who you really are, is more important than the functioning of your mind. Your mind is meant to be in the possession of, guided by your real self, the soul. So what we're doing is trying to make that happen here. We're trying to effect a relationship with our minds that is constructive. How will you meditate? How will you be able to fix yourself in transcendence and be self-controlled and realize who you actually are beneath all the fluctuations of the mind? If all of these things are so unsettled, there's so much insecurity, so much unprocessed stuff, that's why we're looking at this, because there is no escape. There is no way to not deal with this stuff. And at the same time, if we put so much stock in it that we pour all of our hours and all of our energy and all of our excitement, enthusiasm, or pain into just this feature, then we lose ourselves and we've lost the whole point of the thing. And Don and Russ will also tell you the Enneagram is a spiritual tool. It's meant for spiritual purposes. It's meant for reclaiming yourself. So now you're misappropriating the thing. You're taking it away from its purpose. And it may have some benefits, but it's highly temporary. It's very fleeting. And it's very much robbing ourselves of the satisfaction, the fulfillment, and the life that we crave, all of us. So here we're walking that fine line, psychologically doing our due diligence for the sake of the spiritual goal and to help other people similar.
As a listener, if I feel inspired to, I need to work on this so that how do I approach the self if I have these holes or these traumas? How does one start? What is the first step I take?
The first step is, in all of the traumas that we have, there is the recognition of what I needed and how it was not given or how it was violated. And to be able to step back and to really see, well, what really happened. Healing happens when we do strive for forgiveness, both of ourselves and of the other. There is really no healing without it. But for forgiveness to happen, that requires some kind of healing as well. They're very, very intertwined. So the place to begin here is to understand, when we understand our orientation, we also are honestly able to own our needs. And when we own our needs, we also can then see how otherwise our needs become entitlements. And we go about the world as though people are supposed to provide that for me. When we say, these are mine, this was my starting point, and I recognize that it was not given. And then why wasn't it given? Why didn't I receive it? It's starting to piece all of those things together.
Even when it was supposed to be given by the parents, let's say, still there's an entitlement that comes from the sense of deprivation. And that has to be healed. That has to be healed. You cannot walk around with those kinds of misgivings and the desperate energy and the kind of reactivity that results, and then be like, I'm a spiritualist, so it's all good. And it doesn't work. You can do that for some time, but if you want the actual fruit of spirituality, self-realization, identifying exclusively with who you are, the soul, you have to actually cultivate. You have to know yourself, and you have to cultivate wholeness and reconciliation with where you are at present, who you are at present in this incarnation, so that you can get beyond, so that you can go to the deepest self. And you want to be able to provide that for other people. Otherwise, we commit a lot of violence emotionally, and hopefully not anything more than that, but that's bad enough. We commit a lot of emotional violence if we don't work through these things. We expect from other people, we hurt them, we create offenses, and that is a spiritual understanding that we have to avoid offenses for our path to be clear and for us to actually succeed.
Thank you both for demystifying parental orientation, first of all, and for really inspiring the need to understand and act on this insight that comes from parental orientation with the Enneagram. So I'm grateful. I've gained a lot from this conversation, and I really hope that others who are listening do as well. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Upbuild Enneagram Library. Upbuild is a leadership development company that offers workshops, coaching, and other services to help you on the path towards being your best self, free from the shackles of the ego. To learn more about our work, visit our website, upbuild.com, and sign up for our newsletter to gain access to podcasts, reflections, and upcoming events.